Hey, welcome back to Detective Story. I'm Mike Hammond. Thanks again for joining in. We really appreciate it. As always, my brother Chris Kafcas is here with me. Chris, how you doing, brother?
How's it going, Mike?
Well, thank you. Well, we are about a week out from Christmas here, so happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas. Probably be the last show of 2024. Thank you very much for the support this year. It's been great. We've had a great time, and Chris, thanks again for being here and helping me out.
My pleasure. We got a lot planned for 2025. It's going to be an exciting year.
It will be. It will be. So today, we got a really special guest, a close friend, a former coworker, and one of the best homicide detectives in the city of Chicago. Without further ado, Sergeant Michele Wood.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great, Mike. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
I'm sandwiched in between two legends.
I am.
Michele, before we get started, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Don't you think he looks a little bit like Richard Gere?
Yes, actually. You know what? That's actually pretty good. The new glasses, too. Huh?
I've been trying to sell that for 40 years.
It's finally working. It's finally working.
Finally, Richard Gere's getting old enough that...
2 out of 3 people agree.
Right. One of them's not Richard Gere, I'm sure. I'm going to be hearing from his attorneys. Anyway, and nobody even knows who Richard Gere is anymore, so that's cool. Anyway, but thank you. Thank you very much.
I really do see it, though.
Thank you. It means a lot coming from you. It really does. From Chris, yeah. Anyway, off we go. Michele, thanks so much. Just for a little depth here, you're Chicago police officer, still sergeant in homicide as we speak.
Yep. Area 4 homicide in Chicago.
Area 4 rocks. West side's the best side.
West side's the best side. You got it.
23 years and 18 of them on the job, 18 of them in the detective division.
Yeah.
Right?
I was promoted when I had about 5 years on the job, and I went into the D unit. I was promoted in 2017 to sergeant. I went back to patrol for a little bit, and I was lucky enough to go back to the detective division as a sergeant, and that's where I am now, and that's where I will probably end out my career.
This is maybe a strange question because not necessarily how you would, I guess, quantify it, but how many cases do you think, homicide cases, do you think you've worked on in that period of time?
You know what? Someone asked me that before, and I really have no idea. At least hundreds.
Hundreds.
Hundreds, yeah. I'll go with that.
Welcome to the city of Chicago, folks.
Yeah,
Seriously.
that's a question we get a lot, right? And it's very difficult to quantify that here because, especially when we're young detectives,
Sure.
we're going out on everything to learn, and we're helping out on cases. So there's like a differentiation between cases we're assigned and homicides that we worked on. That homicides that we worked on, I think, can reach 500 in a 10-year career pretty easily, right?
Yeah, definitely. I can tell you now, as a sergeant, I average supervising myself that I'm responsible for about 30 a year. But that doesn't mean that I only went out on 30 a year.
Right.
It means that I, myself am responsible for those 30 cases.
And you two work together in homicide?
Yes.
Area 4?
We were in Area North at the time, which did cover Area 4. It changed over a little bit when we had a new superintendent.
Right.
So they closed a lot of the areas, and we only had 3 areas.
You guys moved up to Belmont Western?
We
Correct.
did.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. So it was a little bit of a merger. It was a little bit problematic because they brought a lot of the different personalities from the different areas, namely Area 4, and they brought them over to Area 3, where I was. And they put some of the different personalities on the same team. But in our case, it actually worked out pretty well.
It did, yeah, right. I mean, coming from Area 4, we were probably way overstated our importance, our ability, because we really felt like, West Side's very busy, a lot going on. But, we, like meeting Michele, we met some great people. And then they started putting us on homicide teams, which is also a change. Where we're partners always before, and then you'd work with other people all the time. But then for a time period, they decided, I think it was probably a hopeful financial decision to create homicide teams where you'd have 6 or 8 detectives assigned to a team. That ended up costing them a lot more money because now you get, instead of having 2 detectives subpoenaed to court, so you
had 8.
had 8, right? So
Boy.
it was short term.
There was a lot of forethought that went into that decision, I have to say.
It is the Chicago Police Department.
Yeah, it worked out well in certain instances because when you're out on a crime scene, you get a lot done. You know, you can canvass,
Right.
you could, talk to a lot of people at one time. You can also say, okay, Mike, you go to the hospital. You know, you go talk to this person. You go notify next of kin. So you can do a lot at one time. But also, when you ran into overtime, those same 6 to 8 people were also all on overtime. So.
Right.
Yeah, right. And our team, I think, particularly worked well because we had a combination of one of the guys on the team. I don't have his permission, so I'll mention. Another, like me, had been a detective working homicides for quite a bit of time. We still enjoyed it. He's much, especially at that time, much harder charger than me. But then we had a group of younger detectives like Michele and who were really eager to be out there and talking to people and learning. I mean, you were brand new, but so we had a lot of energy, we had a lot of knowledge, and everybody on that team could do the critical thing to me, and they had the ability to talk to people. And that's the question: what makes a good homicide detective? And my most common answer is your ability to get people to talk to you. And everybody on that team was pretty good at that. So that was a pretty sweet setup. We had a good sergeant who was very experienced and knew what we were doing, so always had our back, and so it worked out really well. And there was no burden on us, any one person, to be in a room with an offender for 2 days at a time, because all of us had that ability to kind of
Right.
converse.
Is there a case that you guys worked on together that kind of stands out? Still remember?
Yeah, we brought Michele reminded me of this Kimberly Harris case that we worked on as a team, which really worked out. It was a horrifying case, but really fascinating, and really that taxed the whole team, right? We all had a lot to do with it.
This summer was super busy. I mean, because we really did. We had the Hammond Sutton case. We had a few cases that were crazy, but this one stood out just because of the fact that when certain cases you have witness statements, you have forensics, you have video evidence. This had everything. And some of the parts of the case that came together were really bizarre.
I mean, just from the outside looking in, this case looks like a TV show.
Yes.
I mean, it's like you couldn't make this up.
Yes. Yeah. It was the murder of Kimberly Harris. Kimberly Harris was a young girl who lived on the west side of Chicago, and she actually was in the car with her boyfriend, who was shot multiple times, and they actually were being intimate inside a vehicle and were shot multiple times, and the same bullet shot both of them. So the bullet went through her into her boyfriend. He died. She didn't. She ended up being the sole surviving witness, and they did what they call as a dying declaration. So they interviewed her because they thought she was going to die, and they took her statement and they put it on video. Back then, we didn't put people on video immediately. This was, I believe it was in 2012. I'd have to look at the exact date. But so they videoed her, and she ended up saying, Debo shot me, and she knew who Debo was, which was DeMaria's Bridges. They went to school together. They knew each other pretty well. They ended up, as time went on, she was a great witness. She wanted to proceed with the investigation. She went to grand jury. She did everything that she was supposed to do. Debo was placed into custody. 8 months later, they're getting ready to just preparing for trial. And she is then shot again, and she dies as a result of those injuries. So what's interesting about that is
So you guys handle the actual homicide? Not the first shooting?
Not the first shooting.
The
correct.
first shooting, though, was actually handled in Area 4 where Mike was. So Mike was aware of the original shooting because it was very interesting. Everyone knew about the fact of the way that the incident happened, and her boyfriend was very well known in the area.
Okay.
Yeah, so she then is shot, and she's actually at a repass. A repass is
Like a wake.
basically a wake, yeah. So it's just interesting that she's at a wake, and she's one of her friends is passing. I don't want to say this without convoluting the story, but she's celebrating the memory of someone else who passed away. So she ends up getting shot multiple times, and they're going through the forensic evidence to try to figure out if the shell casings match the ballistic evidence that's found inside of her. And they end up figuring out that it looks like the bullets that are oxidized inside her body match
From the first shooting.
from the first shooting match the new bullets that are inside her body. So in layman's term,
The dummy used the same gun.
yes. Except we know that the offender that shot her the first time is in jail, so he could not have possibly done
Right.
this. So,
Yeah, that's it. And then, we get, when she basically went into hiding for a while, right?
yes.
And then for whatever reason, she starts showing back up on the block. Maybe the day she shows up on the
It
block.
was that day.
Yeah. And I don't recall what made her, there was something going on that made her come out.
The repass.
Oh, is that right? Okay. So, yeah, she's at this repass. She's in the neighborhood. They quickly kind of organize their forces and get right up on her, kill her right then. The first day she'd been out in public, out of hiding in some time. And so we catch that murder as a team. Now we're in Area North on our homicide team. We recalled the earlier shooting where her boyfriend was killed and all that. And we had video. It turned out to be a pretty good case in general as far as prosecuting it because we had independent witnesses. We had somebody during the canvas, which is where you're kind of knocking on doors and talking to people. I believe it was during canvas, but somebody sees a offender running away, throw a purse up onto the roof of like a factory building, which butted up against she was killed. There was a school on one side of the street, houses, residential, and then behind that there were some like factory buildings. This is in the west side, and they saw one of the guys run away, throw a purse on that. So we get up there, and the purse has a gun in it,
Yep.
right? Turns out to be the gun used in both murders, not brain surgeons, thankfully, neurologists.
No, and it was actually raining that day, which was so crazy because the offender took the purse and flung it up, and it'd been raining for days. And actually, you think, okay, there's no way we're going to get DNA on the strap, but the strap was perfectly covered the way that it fell, and we were actually able to swab the strap, and we were able to get a DNA profile from that. And the DNA profile was the person who actually did fire the weapon and threw the purse.
Better than a TV show. in terms of
Yeah, I mean, the way this
Like
case...
if I saw this on TV, I'd be like, no
Yeah.
effing way.
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of like, at each stage of this, we were like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, like, but yeah, it worked out great. Didn't we have phone communication by the one brother who was in the county or is in IDOC, basically orchestrating that murder with his brother, right?
Yeah, so the person that's in county jail awaiting trial for the murder that he committed of the boyfriend is on the phone with his brother, who's got no background. He actually works at the prestigious university that is in the state of Illinois. That we actually went there to pick him up when we placed him into custody. He is talking to him, but they're talking in code, and they are smart about it then because they're not doing a lot of stuff that we can actually use, because we can get phone records from the jails, and you can actually listen to them, but we didn't get a lot of stuff there. So he was actually pretty smart about that. But the person who ended up orchestrating this whole thing was the killer's brother. And he thought, I'm so smart, I'm going to get away from this because I'm going to hire some lower level person to do this. And the person who he hired that ended up doing this ended up leaving his DNA on the purse and on the gun. And he had this fancy Q56 Infinity that was caught all over video. And when he came into the area, this vehicle, we noticed it at some point on video, so we were able to track it. Back then, there weren't cameras the way that they're all
Right.
now, but we were able to track it a little bit. And the high school that was over there had some pretty good video, so we were able to use some surveillance video that were able to give us a pretty good idea of
At
where he
each
was
turn,
going.
you guys had to be kind of like, no way. Like
Lots of no ways.
With like when with the bullets, like the bullets match. Bullets match what? Like the old bullets that are inside it. Like no way.
I even thought it might have been a mistake. I'm like, no. Make sure. Are you looking? No, they're oxidized bullets. I'm like, okay, let's compare them to the gun. We have the gun now. Look at the gun and look at the shell casings. We have these, expended shell casings
Right.
that are on the ground. Someone's wrong here. You're looking at something else. No, every single piece
Right.
of forensic evidence that we recovered was fired from the weapon that we recovered.
And you can bet, and I
And
don't,
a purse with a DNA sample on the handle.
right, and
in
you
the
can,
rain.
you can bet, I'm not sure about this, but just based on my experience, you can bet that either the defense or the state just went ahead and tested it again at trial, right? Just because they were
Absolutely.
probably the same, like, okay, this is impossible.
They're like, this
right?
is impossible. I'm like, are you stupid? Couldn't you get another gun? And what's odd is, Mike, you went out to Michigan or Indiana because we went and tracked the brother, the good brother that had no background. He was running guns for the drug dealers in Chicago. So you're running guns and you're dumb. I was going to say dumb ass, but I'm not going to say ass. You're dumb.
I don't think there's any other way to describe it.
But I'm like,
I didn't say it.
yeah. I'm like, you're running guns and you couldn't take one of those guns and use one of those instead of, maybe he was trying to make a statement or something.
I think
But Mike
it
went
had-
and found all these other guns that he was running into Chicago and giving to other bad people. And
Yeah, he was getting them at a pawn shop or
Yes,
something, right?
uh-huh.
Yeah. I remember it talking. Yeah. I think we'll never probably know, but it does make sense that there was some type of statement being, I'm going to use the same gun, whatever, because that's an amazing level of stupidity, if not really stuff that Einstein would study.
Yeah,
That's pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, that
special.
case, Kimberly didn't make all of the best life choices, but she didn't deserve that. It was great the way that case.
she was actually offered money, right, to not testify.
That's how they set her up, kind of in a way. I think was they said, we're going to give you money to testify. Whether I don't know if she agreed to that or she's going to meet him, but she never got the money.
yeah, she never got any money. At some point, one of the people that were friends or acquaintances or whatever said that the good brother, Terry, said, okay, we're going to give you some money not to testify. And at that point, she was probably sick of, being stuck inside her house. At some point, she was in some kind of witness protection or something where they were trying to protect her. No one stays in that in Chicago, especially. Many people have been put in witness protection, and it's just not any good. Like, a lot of times, they're like, okay, we're going to move you far away. You're on the west side. We're going to put you on the south side. They'll never find you. Like, it's not any good.
We're going to move you to Homewood.
Yeah, it's not even that good, though. It's like,
Not even Homewood.
yeah. It's like, you're in Logan Square, we're going to move you to Wicker Park. They'll never find you. Like, it's not any good. So I think she thought, okay, this, maybe I can, uncomplicate my life. Maybe I'll take this. I don't know. We don't have any reason to believe that actually did happen. We don't have
Right.
any proof. So perhaps it did happen.
There is-
Maybe it did, maybe it didn't.
Not to backtrack, but there is one, you mentioned it at the beginning. There's one kind of interesting, and before the show when we were talking, you brought up a phrase for it. The way that her last words were used, when they thought she was going to die, she gave, what was it called again?
A dying declaration.
Dying declaration. It was used in a very particular way.
Yeah. So normally a dying declaration is used when you give a statement right before you die. And she did provide a statement, but she didn't die as a result of the injuries that she sustained when she was shot. But because she died as a result of that incident, they were able to use her words as a dying declaration. So it's kind of a
Because the two
spin.
cases were linked.
Because she did die as a result of that shooting, just
Right.
not at that point. She died because she testified because of that shooting. So they kind of changed the way that they use it, and it's actually never been used like that before. They actually used the Drew Peterson Hearsay Exception Act,
Right.
which to my knowledge has never been used other than Drew Peterson. It's kind of like Drew Peterson, they kind of made that law for him to convict him. And I always said Drew Peterson would have got out of jail had he not made all those other crazy mistakes that he made afterwards, like putting hits on judges and attorneys and whatever other nonsense that he did. Because the laws that they used to convict him, they kind of made for him. And I'm like, at some point, someone is going to say, okay, this is, you can't do that. But luckily, he's an
Yeah,
idiot.
what happens, right, yeah, right. What happens in these cases is you have a critical piece of evidence that is inadmissible, but there's something outside of it. The best known use of that in Illinois was the Harry Aleman case. Harry Aleman was an infamous mob hitman in Chicago. And he was found not guilty of the murder of a guy, a mob hit in I don't know, 70s or 80s. And it came out later, he's found not guilty, right? So the double jeopardy rule applies. He can't be tried again. What happens, though, is the judge, there's one of those Grey Lord, it wasn't Grey Lord, but I don't believe, but it was one of those roundup of corrupt judges that happened in the 80s, early 90s. That judge was caught up in that, and I think it was the attorney said, yeah, he paid him off. The judge ended up committing suicide before he was brought to trial on it. But the state argued in that case that the double jeopardy didn't apply because Aleman had paid off the judge, so he's never really in jeopardy.
Right.
They successfully argued that, retried him again, and he was convicted and went to prison. So, and as far as I know, I don't know of another case in the country. There might be now because that's been 30 years ago probably, but that was the first time that we ever heard, I think nationally, this double jeopardy being overcome. So this case is very similar. That those dying declarations are tough because, especially tough if it's just the detective who hears it. Now, in this case, they had videotaped her, what they believe was going to be her dying declaration.
And she also has to believe that she's going to die. It can't be like you say something and I believe you're going to die. You also have to believe you're going to die.
But
So
right.
if not, it's not a dying declaration.
Yeah, right. Because I had several cases where, players on the West Side I knew got shot, and I knew him. They tell me, "Hey, Hammond, this guy shot me." Okay, 'cause he thought he was dying. Then he didn't die, and he's like, "I didn't say shit to you."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I never said that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got nothing. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
But
But that is a dying declaration. Like he
it
didn't die.
is. It is.
Yeah.
But they're tough in court if it's just the detective is
Right.
the only witness because it's in Cook County, USA, those are tough. But in her case, it was much more solidified.
Yeah.
Because they had the wherewithal to videotape her in the hospital, I believe, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a fascinating case on a lot of levels, and a lot of bad criminal work done there, so which helped us a great deal.
So everybody goes to jail.
Yeah, in that case, Demarius Bridges, Debo, was actually found not guilty of her murder, the conspiracy part of the murder. And it was just they couldn't pull it together, but he was found guilty of the attempt murder of her. He was found guilty of murdering her boyfriend. And then the brother was found guilty of her murder. The actual killer was Tyrell Lewis, right? Tyrell Lewis?
I think that is right.
He was the actual killer, but this guy's a killer. You know, when they draw pictures of like the features of a killer, they drew his face.
He's a hitman. He was a real hitman. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a good caper. I mean, it really was.
Yeah, but I mean, we had everything there. Like we had a partial license plate, and then we had DNA, and then we had ballistic evidence, and then, we had a dying declaration, and then we had the Hearsay Exception Act, and, we had every challenge, but then we had everything. And I always tell people, I'm like, what solves cases? Luck. And if you pay attention to stuff, I'm like, and God. I'm like, I'm very lucky. I'm like, because I think sometimes I miss stuff, and God's like, hello, hey, whoo, look over here, Michelle, gun.
Yeah, right.
So,
Oh, there it is.
yeah. I'm
There
like,
it
ooh,
is.
what did I slip? Look, a gun.
Right. No, that's the truth. I mean, it does take sometimes, like if they were smart, boy, this would be a hard job, one. And
yes.
two, it is just, and sometimes you get good people who cooperate, to be
Yes.
fair.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's a tough sledding, and because, you really got to make some tough choices to come forward in some of these neighborhoods that are besieged by violence. So
It's fascinating. I've known him for most of my adult life, and I know I could just picture him in a room. And he walks in, he's a big dude, just kind of looms. People just start talking.
Yeah, that's how
Right.
pretty much how it works.
How about yourself? Do you have what's your strategy when you get someone in the room?
actually, I don't think that's a fair characterization of the way I interview people, but go ahead. We could discuss that at another time when we're alone.
Looming? He's looming.
No. Go ahead. That's a good question.
My old partner, John, used to always say that I was a bad cop. And it wasn't, I don't have patience. So I think I have more patience now than I used to. But I don't have patience for bull, SHIT. So with Terry, when I went in the room and I
That's a
talked to him-
swear word if you spell that out.
Yeah. It's not. So when I got in the room with Terry, I talked to him for a little bit. I got all the information I needed. And then afterwards, when he would lie, I'm like, yeah, that's not true. And he's like, this happened, whatever. I'm like, you're a liar. And if you want, I'll tell you why you're a liar. And that was just my strategy. I'm like, okay, I'm not mad at you and I'm not upset with you. I'm like, but you're a liar and I don't believe you. And now I'm leaving. And with him, it was funny because at one point during the trial, his attorney said I beat him. And so they had to go through a whole thing on trial. They're like, at 152, did you punch him? No. At 116, did you kick him and say this? I'm like, no. And they went, there were 1,000 of those. And it was funny because he's exactly 100 pounds heavier than me and 1 foot taller than me. So it was funny. And at points, then the prosecutor then played the video of him like, can I talk to Michele? Because he kept begging for me to come back. And I'd walk over. I'm like, what? What?
What do you want?
And he's like, can I talk to you again? I'm like, no, you keep lying. If you keep lying, I'm not talking to you. And he'd say something, lie. I'm like, liar, goodbye. So my strategy is always, I'll talk to you for a little bit, but once you're lying, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Because I don't need your nonsense statement. I don't need your lies. I'll give you an opportunity to talk if you want to talk. And, a lot of times we're getting like what looks like useless information. Get up, I'm like, what'd you do this morning? I want to know what your day is like. And a lot of times that useless information helps us out. Like, Mike, okay, what did you do this morning? How'd you get here? Where'd you park? What kind of car do you have? How long have you had that car? What did you do this morning? What did you do yesterday? Oh, how did you guys meet? Stuff like that paints a whole picture for me because that's how I remember things. That's how I learn about you. And that's what I did with him. And that's
Right.
how I learned every bit about him. I knew I knew every single thing about him. And I also then knew what his weaknesses were.
Right.
And that's how I used it to interview him. And he really, really thought, because I didn't yell at him and because, I guess I did yell at him, but because I wasn't like aggressive with him, he kept saying, he's like, how long do I have to be here? I'm like, dude, like, for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, I think, a big part of Michelle's brilliance in getting people to talk is that style. And we can get into this a little bit more, but also, she's a bit less, more, weren't, especially in that time, there weren't a lot of female homicide detectives.
Are there now?
There's more now, I think. I mean, I worked with, it seems like a bunch over the years, but not common.
Yeah, right now in my area, we have one.
Not including you.
No, we have one detective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when she went and sat in the room with potential offender, it's a different, it's not something they're used to. Right. You're used to seeing me come in.
I'd have been like, send the big guy back in, please.
Yeah, and in that style, what would not ever work for me is using my size and being like, hey, it just doesn't work. I'm not scared of that. So my style was more of like my old partner Sam would say, kind of overwhelmed with common sense. Kind of a little bit the antithesis of what Michele does. I would be like, yeah, but that doesn't make sense, right? Because of this, and this. Yeah, and so they come up with story two. Yeah, but dude, like, okay, I hear you, but that doesn't make sense because of this, and this, right? And then you paint this long, and after a while, they're like, damn, I'm out of things to say. Michelle's style was more, and worked really great for her. It was more like, yeah, that's bullshit. I'm not even hearing that. Move on, or I'm done talking to you. And then they start asking for her back. They don't want to talk to me or the other, I want to convince her that they're telling the truth and continue to paint themselves into in a corner that,
How long did you two work together?
I'd like to take a moment from the program to have a real talk about safety and security. Toward that end, I would like to introduce you to my friends over at Blue Knight Security Solutions, your ultimate partner in protection. Blue Knight Security Solutions isn't just your average check your ID at the door security company. They're a team of elite detectives, investigators, and law enforcement professionals with unparalleled expertise. Whether you need their real-world investigative prowess or securing your home, business, synagogue, church, or event, Blue Knight has you covered. From risk assessment to tailored security plans, they'll ensure your safety. Blue Knight Security Solutions provides street-smart operators who can handle any situation. Contact Blue Knight Security Solutions today at 773-706-4920 or visit BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com.
You work together.
Couple of years at least,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when Mike went over to cold case, after a while, I mean, Mike been doing it for a very long time. You get burned out a little bit,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
when you want to move on to something else. So he didn't really move on to something else. He went to cold case, which was still kind of the same
No,
thing.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's still around there, so he still brings stuff over, like, hey, I'm working on this case, and, we'll come over like, hey, Mike, we need your assistance on this. So it wasn't like we didn't work together. He wasn't necessarily on our team, but we still worked together.
Yeah. Whenever I needed, like, okay, I need to go find this person. I'm kind of by myself. Sometimes I'd have a partner, but mostly by myself. That was not the citywide cold case unit. That was a cold case unit, just an area north. And I'd always go to them and say, I need to find this guy. You guys go out. So they always have somebody to go out, or they'd find him for me. That was more common. Like, hey, that guy, you're looking for, we got him. Oh, great. Thank you.
One of the things we've talked a lot about we did basically 2 episodes on two different cases. So 3 episodes on 2 different cases. But I've had the opportunity to be around detectives through Mike for most of my adult life. mostly in the tavern setting, but now in here too. And one of the things that keeps coming up are cases that just stick with you. Like it seems that everybody has a case either that's still kind of lingering, but it's a case that they just can't not hold close. Do you have any cases like that? I know that's kind of a tough on the spot question.
It's a little tougher when she's a sergeant in homicide
Right.
now. Not that you don't. I'm not trying to speak for you, but
No.
you still got a wave of cases coming at you all the time. So it's probably
Yeah,
harder.
I mean, I still have active cases now that I'm still working on, but I think the case for me that will always stick with me was probably Heaven Sutton was a little 7-year-old girl that was killed. And I think it was the first little girl that I had where she was shot and killed, and I had to do the body. And I felt terrible. Like we were driving around and I heard the shots when they went off, and then I found out a 7-year-old girl was killed. So when we went there, I was far off, but I saw them working on her. And so they sent me to the hospital to do her body. Her mom is still my friend now. I still talk to her mom. But when we went to the hospital, I was with an older guy, and the mom came up to me, and the mom is, crying. She's like, she's never had a male doctor. Don't let a man see her body. And I said, okay. So I was with an older guy who's now retired, and he goes with me, and he's like, okay, let's go do the body. And I'm newer, I've got 6 years as a detective then, which in Chicago is not a lot. So I've got 12 years-ish on the
Right.
job. And I was like, and this guy's got 35 years on the job. And I was like, you can wait outside. He's like, okay, come on, let's go. Let's get this done. And I'm like, well, no, I'm going to do the body by myself. He's like, what are you, soft? Let's go. And I'm like, you're going to wait outside. And I wouldn't let him come in. And I was kind of afraid to do the body. Like, I didn't want to touch her. Like, I felt weird. I felt creepy because we have to check everything. We have to make sure that there's no other injuries. Like, yeah, I know she was shot and killed. She was shot.
Right.
I believe she was shot in the chest. I had the weirdest, I went up to her body, and I had the weirdest calming thing came over me. And I saw her mom afterwards, and I was like, oh, and I don't even know why I said this. I'm not super religious or anything like that. I go, oh, I'm glad I know there's a heaven because I know she went to heaven. And that's like how we
Right.
connected afterwards. It was the weirdest calming thing where I was there, and I remember what she was wearing and everything else, and I did her body. And I saw the gunshot, and I just covered her up afterwards. I'm like, I don't need to look at anything else. And then I went out afterwards. And of course the detective's like, softball, what is this broad doing? And I didn't care. But those are one of the things that police can be really harsh. You know what I mean? Because it's one of those things like, she's dead. A male doctor and a male isn't going to see her. She's dead.
Right.
I'm like, well, this is what her mom wanted. And, and he wasn't being disrespectful, like he wanted to see something or wanted to do something.
No.
He wanted to get the job done.
Yeah.
And this is what he wanted to do. And to me, I'm like, the mom wanted me to do this, and I wanted to do it. And the mom, I'm thinking, doesn't recognize anything. The mom saw exactly what I did. And the mom's like, that's why I always liked you. But the mom, fast forward years later, I still would see her at jobs, and she's helped me out on so many things on other jobs.
She's a force in nature.
She is. This woman is 6'2" or 3", and
Big,
yeah,
big woman.
Yeah.
I know her well too.
Yeah.
And she would call me. And
yeah,
first, I want to go back for a second for people that aren't from Chicago. In Chicago parlance, soft doesn't mean like weak, hard soft. It means crazy.
yes,
So if somebody
Right.
comes, if
Yeah.
you meet somebody from Chicago and you say something, they say, "Are you soft?" It doesn't mean like, "Are you a tough guy or hard?" It means, "Are you crazy?"
yeah.
Yeah.
Got a screw loose?
Yeah.
Like,
Screw loose. That's it.
Got a screw loose? Like, what's
Yeah,
up with
that's the Chicago parlance. But her mother, I got to know really well too throughout that case, and I got tasked a lot of times. We had to bring her in several times because she
Yes.
was a witness, and I got tasked with calling her, going finding her, picking her up a place, bringing her in, and she had a lot of affection for all of us. I think,
She did.
But fast forward several years later, I'm testifying at a trial, and it was a big gang trial. And the galley was full. It was one of the old-time courtrooms that are like on the 6th floor of 26th California. So whenever you see Chicago movies and trial, they always use these courtrooms. They're the big old courtrooms with
Yeah.
the big judges. the newer courtrooms on the lower floors are much more efficient, smaller glass partitions. But I'm testifying, and I see Heaven's mother is on the side. I would have noticed her, except because it was the defendant had a big group of people. But as I'm testifying, I see her get up and walk out, and when she moves, and I just thought, that's strange, she's there, And so I finished testifying. We take a break. I'm done. I think they broke for lunch or something. So everybody's walking out, and I'm walking out. And there's all of the crowd from the trial are out in the hallway. And, usually you don't catch much gruff from anybody. Occasionally somebody will say something, but it's mostly nothing. But she's like, hey, Detective Hammond. And I see her, and I'm not going to mention her name, but I say, hey, how you doing? She's good. She comes and gives me a big hug right in front of her. And she said, I told him, she goes, I left because I told him, if he's on this case, he did it. I ain't supporting you. She walked right out. She was sitting beside the defendant's mother. She's like, if he's on this case, he did it. Like, well, thank you. I appreciate
That's the truth.
it. You know what I mean? But that interesting side note with her. We had a lot of, she lost her 7-year-old daughter. So, I wish that on anybody, but she's quite a personality.
Oh, yeah.
She certainly helped us corral that case, no doubt about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a tough one, but, it's just one of those things, and that will always stick with me because, nobody wants to do the body, like, especially with that. And I'm like, when they sent me in there, I was like, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And I still don't like doing bodies. But.
No, I mean, doing bodies doesn't bother me. I just talked to a group of young, middle-aged kids on the west side the other day. I got asked to talk to them. I enjoy doing that. And often I get asked, what's the worst thing you ever seen? Especially kids ask that for whatever reason. High school age kids, what's the worst thing you ever seen? I always slow walk that, but I say, you see a lot of bad stuff, but anything involving kids is always hard. And that pretty much shuts it down. I mean, even young kids are like, I don't want to know anymore. Thank you. You know what I mean? Yeah. I get that one. That was a tough case. It really was. The poor little girl.
Yeah, that was brutal.
So I don't want to get into real quick. I don't want us to run all night, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about because I glossed over this, but I want to come back to it. For you, coming into a male-dominated detective world, I know there was challenges there. Also, because I heard them when I came from Area 4 to Area North, and I think it's just a tough environment. But we quickly realized in working with you, you're really good at what you did, and that's really all that mattered to us. I mean, I think it should always just matter to anybody. But I mean,
Sorry.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot with that, but how is that? I mean, and I guess if we're talking to young women now who are coming up, want to be police, want to be detectives, this true crime genre is huge, and it is predominantly women that make up this this fan base, right? And it just fascinates women. And so there are going to be a lot of young women that want to be, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. So that's, I guess, two-headed question there. What were the challenges for you? How did you overcome them? What would you suggest? You're a sergeant supervisor now, so you may have these conversations. But
yeah, I teach a class to all the new detectives. My old partner and I do it, and I always end the class with that because I think it's important for women to support women because women, at least when I started, women also were the biggest problems for other women sometimes. It was, and I don't want to cry me a river or anything like that, but it was tough because I wanted to work homicides. And I remember I would tell the old timers when I was a brand new detective, they're like, no, broads don't work homicides, and that's exactly what they told me. And it did bother me, but I was like, no, when I got on this job, I wanted to be a homicide detective. And there weren't any female homicide detectives at that point for me to look at. There were none. And it wasn't like there were one or two. There were none. And they would say, no, you can go to SVU, Special Victims Unit. And there's nothing wrong with working SVU. There are plenty of amazing detectives, but that's not what I wanted to do. So when I got to the area that I worked in, I came from Area 1, which is on the south side. I was there for like 8 or 9 months. And then I went to the area I was in, and they're like, you're going to Special Victims Unit. And I was like, oh, God, I don't want to go to Special Victims Unit. I'm like, what if I work every single sex crime that comes in? Nobody wants to work sex crimes. Can I go to violent crimes? And so the commander kind of made a deal with me. He's like, yeah, you can do that, because I'm like, I want the opportunity to work shootings. It was almost like, no, you are not going to be able to do that. So I ended up working sex crimes, which, women kind of get put in that too. Sex crimes, though, is amazing. It's a great place to work. There are good cases out there. And sex crimes can be, even more challenging than murder sometimes. And you talk about victims there. Those are the cases that you want to work. And, talk about stranger danger and animals out there. Those are the people that you have to get off the street. So after a while, I'm like, okay, can I start getting shootings? And then there's still, was pushback. My lieutenant, whose name I won't say, knew I wanted to work murders. And I kept pushing and pushing. And this wasn't like, 6 months. This was 6 years of me begging. And now it doesn't take that long to do it. I'm like, I want to work murders. So when the merger happened, my lieutenant, DPW is what I'll call him, I said, I really want to work murders. And I ended up jumping on a murder investigation because I was with all the old timers. And I kept saying, see, they're old and lazy. They're tired. They all went home because they're old. We ended up working this case that was at Green Dolphin nightclub.
Yep.
And I ended up solving it.
On Webster in Ashland.
Yes, I ended up solving the case. And I solved it. My partner was with me, obviously, and, we were working on the case, but I ended up making the arrest of the offender with my lieutenant because all the old timers whose case it was legit went home because they're all like 150 years old. So my lieutenant's like, okay, go in the room with this guy. I end up getting a straight confession from this guy, but I end up talking to him because I don't know any better. I'm in the room talking to this guy. I talked to him for 46 and a half hours. I'm like, you said go in the room and talk to him. So my lieutenant's like, this girl's, going to be really good. So he ends up talking to our awesome sergeant, and he puts me on a homicide team. Our sergeant says he picked me. He didn't. My lieutenant made him pick me, but it's fine. I ended up on this homicide team, but it's because I was persistent, and I kept going and going and going, and it was tough. But just like Mike said, when Mike came over, everyone called me Bikini Girl. They're like, oh, she got on a homicide team because, I used to do bodybuilding and fitness competitions, and everyone assumed that's how. I'm like, that's not how. It's because I literally would show up on homicide cases. I'm like, you guys need help? No, we don't need your help. And I'm like, okay, do you guys need help? How about now? How about now? And that's how I ended up doing. I was persistent. So now I make a point. I will always try to have a female on my team. I just had a homicide detective leave my area and go to a different area. It was better for her family. I'm talking about the best detective in Chicago. Amazing. I was sad to see her go, but now I'm looking for another female detective to fill her spot because I think it's really important for me to also pay it forward to make sure that I bring women to show them that they can do this too. Because I think a lot of women are afraid, to try to do this. They want to do it. So when I do teach that class, I always say, okay, how many people in here? You're not going to offend me. Who wants to work homicide in here? And I always look to see the females in there, and I try to bring them forward because if not, people are going to ridicule them the same way they did me. Like, you're not going to work, you want to work homicide? What makes you think you can work homicide? So that's, I try to recruit them and, try to bring them forward if that's what they want to do. And it doesn't mean that homicide is the best. Some people, it's good for some people. And if it's not your thing, then, do what you want to do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, that there's a skill set. Well, I think first of all, being a homicide detective it's not one thing, right? It's a multi-layered thing, and so having different personalities, people come from different perspectives, always has value, right? Because you want to be able to look at things from different ways. But back to the sex crimes. There are a lot of women in sex crime, working sex crimes. I hated working sex crimes just because it of the reasons you like invoke so much anger and emotion, and also it's just so not as clear cut as a homicide. But there are many times, and I'd love to mention their names, but I don't have their permission. But I would have cases that had murders had a sexual element to it, and I would go to the sex crimes dicks I trusted, and they were awesome. They have different perspectives. Sometimes, like one in particular, I needed a DNA sample from a guy. It was a case that I worked on for years. It was one of the people, and he was a hard guy. He was going to be tough. And so I'm telling her about it, and she was like, "Oh, no, look, he's got this prior sex report." She goes, "Let me go and talk to him." I said, "Please." And she comes out. She goes, "Hey, no, yeah, he'll give you the sample." And she just totally convinced him it had nothing to do. Is this case that he knew was nonsense, but he knew he was on paper for, and she did a brilliant job with it. And it turns out he wasn't the killer. But I had to eliminate him. I had to. I couldn't have progressed on that case without it. So, yeah. But you're leading the way, and I appreciate it. Chicago Police Department should be very proud of you. I'm proud of the opportunity I had to work with you. It was a lot of fun.
I'm proud just to sit with you.
Thank you.
So, well, one more thing I'll touch on before we wrap up. You have done quite a bit of like television, and I can remember you and your partner, let's call him John, did a contest show that you guys actually won years ago when I first met you.
Yeah.
Right, and after that, you've probably done a dozen or so TV shows. My longtime ex-girlfriend used to say all the time, "Hey, Michelle's on TV again," So just quickly, is that something that interests you? How did you get involved in that? You still do some. Right?
Yeah, I still do it. I actually started doing TV stuff. I did a commercial for the WWE, and that was from doing fitness competitions.
Mm-hmm.
I did a commercial from that, but I ended up doing TV stuff because John and I did a press conference from a girl who was killed at the CTA Red Line. That was another murder that we worked on that was super interesting. And our commander at the time, while we were doing the press conference, he's like, "You know what? I don't know the details of it. I'm going to let the detectives tell you." So we went down and did the press conference, which no one's ever done before, or not no one, but we did the press conference, and the head of the WGN Morning News, he's like, "Are you a model or are you a detective?" I'm like, "I'm a model detective." So after that, I started getting stuff where people are like, "Oh, do you want to be like a talking head on these crime TV shows?" And then I ended up getting a Dick Wolf TV show, which was called Dead Again. And then I did a series on that where we reinvestigated controversial old cases. And then from there, I just started doing talking head stuff. And then most recently, my favorite of all the TV shows is I'm a correspondent on 2020. So that's the most fun because I love 2020.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
I always, it tickles me whenever I see it. Michelle.
Yeah. I watch that stuff too, which is so bad. Everybody's like, "You went home to watch crime TV because your job is boring."
Right.
Closing out 2024 with a famous person.
Right. Yeah, so I think, what else you got?
Yeah, that's it.
We really appreciate it. Anything else? What I
No.
miss?
Awesome. No.
Yeah.
You're very natural. Very natural.
I've been bartending for a long time.
I was a bartender too for years. I can't do this.
He is good. That's why we bring him in.
Yeah, not much use elsewise.
You'd be a good detective, actually.
Yeah, I like committing felonies too much.
Well,
Yeah.
there's that.
He comes from a place of experience. Listen, dude,
Fifth.
I know that's bullshit.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank
really
you guys.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll do it again. Congratulations with everything going on in your life. It's very exciting, and we're happy to have you back.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want to do that.
This is a great
sometime.
setup. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. Carlos does a great
2025, we'll get you back.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
That's awesome.
All right. That's it. Thank you very much.
Y'all have a very safe holiday.
Happy holidays.
Happy
We'll see
New
you
Year.
in 2025.
Happy holidays. Thank
If you got suggestions, things you want to hear, questions for Michele about cases, anything else she does. The website, detectivestory.net, you can hit me there. My email is always a great way to get me, mike@detectivestory.net. It's that simple. We'll always get back. I'll reach out to Michele with any questions you have. Chris, same. Anything you got, you can reach us there. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.